Greetings, and welcome to the Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. We hope that you enjoy what you're about to see, and you can find us on the corner of Broadway and Church Streets at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Or you can find us at bgmethodist.org and on Facebook at Bowling Green First United Methodist Church.
When I got down to Eolia this morning, I had everything up and it was going, and Virginia Burson stops me and she said, and she was looking up there because I had that image kind of is what is up when everyone's coming in, and she says, well, what's the righteous generation? I'm like, well, ironically, that was my first question when I started looking at this psalm. Was I got to this verse and I read that and I go, there were they in great fear, for God is in the generation of the righteous. That's what kind of stopped me and kind of stuck with me. Because I was looking for, well, what am I going to do this Sunday? I knew I wanted to take kind of a Sunday off of this longer series that we've been going through, so we aren't kind of inundated all at one time with everything. And I got to looking around and looking at the lectionary for today, and I was reading through the psalm, and I got caught on that verse. I said, well, maybe this is a good sign. But what does that mean? Now, I am a true child of the 80s and 90s. And that's probably not a great thing, but I read that, the generation of the righteous, and the first thing that came to my mind was this, of course, Pepsi, the choice of the new generation. And then you go onto YouTube and you can find several of the old commercials that are out there, and you go, man, what were we thinking back then? Some of those commercials are a little bit goofy and silly, and but it's this thought of the choice of a new generation. It seemed to me like that's what the psalmist, that's what David in this case was building to, was this idea of a new generation, something special, something different happening, and that would be great. And that's why it's good. You can almost see the Pepsi logo behind this verse as we've got it up here. That there's kind of that forward movement there. But the trouble becomes, how do you reconcile where we are in verse 5 with where we start in verse 1? Because in verse 1 we have, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. Now there are only 7 verses to Psalm 14. Yet we bounce around all over the place. In verse 1, we're at there is no God. In verse 5 we have the righteous generation. In between those places we have no one can do any good and everyone is evil, and why do we do all this evil stuff? And then in verse 7 we end with this. Oh, that the salvation of Israel were come out of Zion. When the Lord bringeth back the captivity of his people, Jacob shall rejoice and Israel shall be glad. We've got a whole bunch of places we're stopping off along here. What are we getting at through all of this? Now, the thing to remember about when we're reading through the Psalms especially is that there are Psalms that express great joy, there are Psalms that express great sadness, and then there are Psalms like this one for today that express great frustration. Where David is pouring out his heart saying, what is going on? What are these people thinking? You can almost see David sitting back writing this down going, really? Really, y'all? Come on. Really, y'all? This is what you all are getting up to? We're getting almost a stream of consciousness writing here, where he is pouring out his heart for what it is that he is trying to deal with these folks and with what it is that's going on and happening around him. It is his frustration that we see, but he is building to a point through here. He is working through all of this. There we go. This is kind of what David's thoughts look like right now. All kind of mixed up. They've all got a place, they've all got a thing, they're all connected in there, but it's really kind of a mess. Trying to figure out where are we going through all these things? How are these things all connected in? And it's hard to make sense of that. You can if you stop and you look and you can probably begin to make some sense of that, but how do we do that? How do we do that? Because that's what our lives look like sometimes. Whether our lives on our own or whether our lives as a community or as a state or as a nation or as a world, it can look like that a lot of times. I just realized, okay, I need to change some of the auto transitions on here because they're moving around on me. That was me. But this is what things look like sometimes. They're kind of this big, jumbled mess. And so how do we begin to make sense of it? Because everything has a purpose and it has a point in there, and it's all got someplace in there, but we've got to be able to make sense of that. And so we know we're building in this psalm, we're building to verse 5. That kind of is a high point of this, the righteous generation. This is where we begin to see David is coming through his despair and his frustration. It says that there is a righteous generation, but the question then becomes, where does this righteous generation come from? Where does it come from? And this is where it's so important what he writes in verse 7. Oh, that the salvation of Israel were come out of Zion. When the Lord bringeth back the captivity of his people, Jacob shall rejoice and Israel shall be glad. The salvation of Israel comes out of Zion. It comes from God. This is where it is. This is where it's coming from. This is where David is saying, all right, this is where we've got to get back to. This is where we've got to begin to get back to, because this is where we became lost. He starts us off and he says, a fool says in his heart, there is no God. Well, too often in today's world, we immediately project that outside of ourselves, and we say, oh, well, obviously it's talking about atheists and people who don't believe in God, and that's a really foolish thing to do, except that in the time when he was writing, that would have been a foreign concept to them, because, where today we have an app for everything on our phones, I can have more apps than I know what to do with on there. Back in their day, they had a God for everything. So this idea that there is no God would have been foreign to them, because they had a God for everything that was going to happen. There was a God for that. David was writing to his own people. He wasn't writing to people outside of them. Those were the people he went to war with, not who he was frustrated with right now. These were his own people who should know better, who should have known better than what it is that they were doing and what it is that they were saying. And he's saying, you all are foolish. You're saying there is no God. What happened to the Lord God, the Alpha, the Omega, the Lord God of Israel, of Abraham, and of Isaac, and of Jacob, and of Moses? What happened to that God? And what happened to that? What happened to that relationship? Why did they turn away? As we remember their history, anytime they turned away, that was when things got bad. Whenever they would turn away from God, that's when things would go wrong. That's when the people of Israel would get hurt. That's when they would struggle the most, was when they turned away. And that's where David's frustration is. But then he says, but there is the righteous generation. That there is hope, even for that. Even for all those that have turned away, that is not the final word on things, because our salvation comes out of Zion. Our salvation comes from God. So now we've got to get there. We've got to get there because this is the way things look. This is the mess that things are in, that we're trying to make sense of. And that's not where we want to end up. Where we want to end up is someplace different. We want to end up more in someplace like this. I was looking for some images to use to work with on this, and I found this one. I'm like, okay, this is good. I like this because the first thing you see on there, this is the first thing I saw, were pictures. Pictures that tell a snapshot of a story in one moment in time. Pictures that when you look at them, there's stories associated with that, of that snapshot in time. There is something else that goes with that you can tell, that you can explore, that it becomes kind of the centerpiece for being able to share something important with others. All that's sitting on top of a map that's full of all sorts of destinations that you can put those pictures on, because that's what we do. We take our pictures, but we remember where they were located. But maps tell us different things. There's a difference between that old Grant McNally road map, our road atlas that a lot of us carried in our cars before phones were a big thing. The ones that you couldn't ever fold back up the same way that you got them. There's a difference between those and between maps of say the subway system in New York City versus maps that you get at state parks for going backpacking and hiking versus maps that some of the farmers might use out in their fields for where they're planting things and where their property lies. Maps tell us different things. We've got to know, well, what map are we looking at? Because that tells us the destinations that we have on our journey. That's where we associate these snapshots of these pictures that we are taking to tell our story, then we've got to have a way to record all of that. Something that filters through all of that and helps us to tell that story. In this case, it's a camera. In our case, it could be something different. For our lives of faith, as we go into this, we'll have folks and that we'll be in conversation and talking with folks, and they'll say, well, why do you go to church to begin with? You know, that may be a question. They go, why do you go? Why is that something that is important to you? And our responses, or at least my responses, a lot of times is, is I want to tell the whole thing. I want to tell the whole story in there. And so, that's what happens when we do that. Because you all have had kids that have tried to tell you about their day, that don't have a concept of linear time yet. So they start hearing it to you, but then there's this thing over here, and that thing here, and that thing here, and that thing there. And then they remember something from last week in another place, way over there that still is important in what they're doing. They get all that stuff all mixed up. They get all the right pieces in there, but they don't get them in the right order anywhere. That's what happens when we try to tell the whole thing at once. But what we want to do is to remember those snapshots. Why do you go to church? If I already answered that question, I would, one of my snapshots would be, well, I grew up in the church. I remember when I was, from the first memories I have, we're being in church. We're being there with my parents and my grandparents and all of their friends and the folks of their generation, where my little brother and I were the youngest of all of their grandkids, of all the grandkids they had. So we were really spoiled in church. We were okay with that. That's where I grew up. That's where I found my first kind of foundation in life, was inside of the church. That's one of my pictures that I have. And I don't have to tell all of them at one time. I don't have to pull out the picture album and show everything, but sometimes you just need that first picture. It might lead to another picture, or it might lead to sometime a couple months later, telling another part of that story. We don't have to tell the whole thing at one time, but we do need to know what are those things that are important. What are the things that we take pictures of in our lives of faith that help us to be able to tell that story? And then we got to know, what map are we putting all of this on? What is it where we can see all of our destinations? For us as Christian people, our map is the Bible. That's what gives us our sense of destination, our sense of direction in life. That's where we can begin to put those pictures down on. Say, this is where that happened. This is where that happened. This is the different points in my journey. Now, I do have to say, I've got up here, I've got a whole stack of new Bible orders that I've been getting from folks all morning, and that's great. And it's going to go as a part of a larger stack. That's good. That's good that we can begin reading and reading for understanding the map, understanding the possibilities that are out there. And that's where I kind of struggle with things. Is whenever I read the Bible, it normally is, well, I've got this sermon coming up, or I've got this class coming up that I'm teaching, or I've got maybe Lent and Advent are always around the corner, and so we've got all those things that are always there that I could be reading for. There's always something there that's getting my reading, that's forcing me to read in a certain direction. But what is really important sometimes is just to read. Is just to sit and study the map, as it were. Not because I'm trying to get any one place in particular, but because I'm just trying to learn and see what is there and understand. And so that's another piece of that helps us to fill out our journey. And then how do we document that? How do we filter all of that? That comes through our heritage, through our history, through the things that shape us in life. It's one of the reasons why we spent this summer talking about our Methodist history and looking at some of John Wesley's sermons, because that is a part of our heritage that shapes the way that we understand and read Scripture, that shapes the way that we understand and grow in our faith. But it's not just that either, though. It's also our own local history as a church and as a community that helps shape our understanding of faith and what God is doing in us and around us. And so that's the next piece of that. And so when we're visiting with folks and they have questions, and it's not even just for other folks, but even for ourselves, can we understand, do we know these pieces? Do we know those important places in our story, those snapshots at those particular points in time that help us to understand and be able to tell the important things? Not trying to do the whole thing all at once, but just individual pieces sometimes is just where we need to start. Just like we did in the psalm this morning, it's finding those places where you kind of start and then begin to build the story as you go. It begins to make sense of things. based on those pictures, based on what it is that provides that direction and that purpose and shows us our destinations, and then do the things that kind of filter all that so we can begin to understand and comprehend. That's the direction we need to go. As we go forward this week, I invite you to do this. To remember what are your snapshots, what are your pictures, what are those important moments in your life of faith, so that you can share that with someone else. Not so you can tell the whole story, but say, well, here is this time. And then at another opportunity you can say, well, here's another time. So you can have those things ready and you can share that in those pictures and those moments, those things that we identify so much with. And then take that out in a world that, unfortunately, a lot of times looks far too much like this. And what they need are ways of being able to organize that and understand that and make sense of that so they get to this place where we remember those things that are most important, that shape who we are and where we've been. They give us the stories that make up each piece of our journey so that we can see how we get from one place to the next, not in one long jump, but through all of those important places in between. Let us go out into a world that needs to know what this looks like so that they can understand their story. And we join our story with the story of so many around us. We join our story with God's story, what He is doing in us and through us and in the world around us. Let us go and share that promise, that hope, and that story with the people that need to hear it. And let us do that in Christ's name. Amen.